Welcome back, Renegades. I'm Radar, and I'm your host, and I'm super excited that you are all here with us this week. So today, we're going to be digging into what do bad leaders, credit cards, and flat tires all have in common, and how this silent killer of success can sneak its way into our life. Let's get into it. All of these indicators are aspects of this silent killer of success, and that's called being. One of the ways that we can really address it simply in our life is asking ourselves, maybe I'm being dramatic, maybe I'm blowing this out of proportion. Is being really this big of a problem? How do we fight this? Well, that is, we need to become. How do we build into our daily lives? And how do we protect ourselves from the silent killer of? And we can do this by employing three main strategies. Welcome to the Renegade Institute. So, as a quick recap from last week, we were talking about initiative and how we should frame and understand it in our minds. And so we've understood that initiative for us is proactively setting the conditions to place us in an advantageous position where we can operate independently and from a position of agency. We discovered that we're going to look at life as a game of chess, where we want to seize the initiative from life before life takes the initiative from us. And so now that we understand how to think about initiative, how to frame it in our minds, this week we're going to be looking at how do we secure the initiative through our daily actions, through our habits. So, what does this silent killer of success look like? What are some of the warning signs that we should be looking for? In order to better explain and better highlight this, we're actually going to start off with kind of a short story that I came up with from an individual that we're going to call Tom. And he's waking up one morning just before taking a big final in school. And so Tom starts off by reluctantly dragging himself out of bed, wiping away the sleep from his eyes with a huge yawn. This is the third time that he's hit the snooze button on his alarm. See, he's gotten roughly 4 hours of sleep since he decided to pull an all-nighter trying to study for his big test today, and he now finds himself 30 minutes behind schedule. He quickly decides to skip his shower to try and make up for time and starts brushing his teeth. After brushing his teeth, he sits down on the toilet, but then he quickly notices that he's run out of toilet paper, and he now has to make do with one sheet of toilet paper before being able to get back up, get out of the bathroom, go to the closet, and find more toilet paper for himself. And this adds another 2 minutes to his time in getting ready for the day. After the bathroom, Tom ends up spending another 30 seconds trying to rummage through his hamper and all his dirty laundry, smelling all his shirts, trying to find one that's the cleanest because he hasn't had the time to do laundry in a few weeks now. Once he's finally dressed and he's made his way downstairs, he opens the fridge to make himself a bowl of cereal, only he quickly finds out that he doesn't have any milk left because he drank the last of it last night during a midnight study break. And so he goes to make toast instead, but then he discovers that he needs to hand wash a plate from the stack of dirty dishes that are sitting in a pile over the dishwasher. This again adds another 2 minutes to his schedule in trying to get out the door. He quickly shoves the toast in his mouth, cursing at being late, and grabs his bag and heads out. And then when he gets in the car, he immediately sees the gas light illuminate as he turns his car on. See, his gas light came on his way home from school yesterday, but he felt that he didn't have the time to get more gas now, and now he needs to do it when he's already late going to school. And just today is not Tom's day. He's way behind. He didn't have time to shower or make coffee, and now he needs to stop for gas because he's not going to make it all the way to school. When he's at the gas station, he elects to buy himself a coffee to try and burn off some of that exhaustion, and this ends up adding another 7 minutes and another $4 to his day. And when he tries to pay for the coffee, he finds that his card's been declined, and it says insufficient funds. What? What day is it? Oh no, that's right. The auto payment for the car loan came through yesterday and drained what little was left in his account. Cursing, he switches to a credit card to pay for the coffee, promising himself that future Tom will figure it out later. Once he arrives at school, his worst fears are confirmed, and all of the closed parking spots are taken. He has to drive another block and a half away to the overflow lot, and then ultimately ends up needing to sprint all the way to class. He arrives late, sweaty, smelly, and disheveled, and the only seat left in the classroom is the one right in front of the professor, as all the other students have already taken their seats and are already scribbling away on their tests. After a brief negotiation and short lecture from the professor reluctantly lets Tom take the test rather than just giving him a 0. As Tom moves to take his seat, he notices the cute girl that he wanted to ask out 2 rows back, but there's nothing that he can do about it now. He's exhausted, he's frazzled, and he can't think clearly. He does ultimately end up passing the test, but only just barely. So, I know that was kind of a dramatic example, and most of us don't have mornings that are that awful and that seem to be filled with that much bad luck. But what did we see throughout this story? Was Tom able to seize the initiative throughout his day, or had life kind of taken the initiative from him and was forcing him to respond to everything that he was doing? We saw a lot of challenges in Tom's daily life. Like, he was only realizing that he was out of toilet paper after sitting down on the toilet. And he only was doing laundry a week or so after he had run out of clean clothes. And then he had to stop and get gas, causing him to be even later because he nearly ran out on the way to school. We also saw that Tom was struggling with financial challenges. He seemed to have a lack of emergency funds in his checking account. It appeared like he was living from paycheck to paycheck, having to pay for everything with a credit card, and that he really didn't have a plan to pay for things back. And then we also saw that Tom really seemed to struggle with time management. Like, Tom, in his morning, he didn't have any time for self-care. He didn't get to work out. He had to skip on his personal hygiene. And he didn't have the time to capitalize on any of the opportunities that could have come up throughout his day. And so all of these examples, all of these indicators are aspects of this silent killer of success. And that's called being reactive. So what is reactive? How do we understand it? First, we're going to start off with a definition. So being reactive is defined as needing to respond to events or situations immediately due to a lack of thinking ahead or planning, or due to a lack of proactively preventing or changing something beforehand. It's a focus on fixing problems only after they occur rather than preventing them in the first place. So, one of the ways that we can look at this, like, let's say we're not sure if we're being proactive or reactive. One of the ways that we can really address it simply in our life is asking ourselves, do we need to be doing this thing right now? So, like Tom, did Tom need to get gas right then in that moment? Yes, because he was going to run out. Did Tom need to skip his shower? Yes, because he no longer had time. So if we ask ourselves, do I need to be doing this thing in this moment? Do I have to be washing this dishes? And we answer yes, then it means we're probably being reactive. Now, maybe I'm being dramatic. Maybe I'm blowing this out of proportion. Is being reactive really this big of a problem? Or are we just kind of making a mountain out of a molehill? And who hasn't done some of these things from time to time? So one of the biggest challenges from living in a reactive way is how reactivity tends to compound and get worse over time. And then we end up kind of getting behind and forced into a reactive state where we no longer have the choice of being proactive because it's already being taken from us from prior reactive decisions, and how these kind of cascade into one of each other. And so we saw this in the story with Tom, where even before the story started, Tom is just waking up and he's already in a reactive state because he's waking up late because he's exhausted because he had to pull an all-nighter the night before, or that he had to stop and get gas on his way to school. How each reactive decision had a domino effect down the line and caused him to be more reactive later on. And so, one way we can think about it in our minds, one way we can kind of reframe it is looking at when we are reactive, it's kind of like using a credit card with a high interest rate to pay for everything. And it puts us into like a time debt trap. And so with credit cards, right? A debt trap is a situation where someone becomes entrapped in a cycle of debt, needing to take on new debt and loans in order to pay for previous debts with no real viable way of getting out. And so when we live in a reactive way, it's like getting stuck into this time debt trap. It's like paying for everything with a credit card, only rather than our money, it's with something far more valuable to us. It's actually the most valuable resource on the planet. And it's the one thing we can never get more of, and that is our time. See, when we're reactive, it's generally we're taking little shortcuts. We're paying for something with a credit card right now in our daily actions that ends up costing us more time to deal with it reactively later in the long run. Just as when we pay for things with a credit card and we don't have a solution for paying that off, we end up having to pay interest on the balance later on at the end of the month. And so when we do this with everything in our life, it starts to compound, and we find that we end up becoming habitually late, habitually behind, constantly trying to catch up with life's demands. And so, what are some of the drawbacks of being reactive? How can this affect us on a personal level when we're living in this time debt trap? And ultimately, how does this end up destroying our ability to seize the initiative? And a lot of the things, some of the symptoms that we see when people are living in this time debt trap is degraded mental health, chronic stress, and anxieties. People start to feel like they're a perpetual victim. It's always bad luck, things that are happening to them, that life is against them. This can contribute to a sense of learned helplessness, where you never have the agency to decide your next action because it's always being dictated to you. This then leads to low levels of self-confidence and diminished sense of control, where we're constantly needing others to help us catch up. We have low productivity despite being busy all the time, and we're just never really able to get ahead. This then can have, again, a cascading effect of a degraded physical health. So we tend to, when we're reactive, end up developing poor eating habits where we're constantly needing to eat out of vending machines and eat at fast food places because we didn't adequately plan or prepare meals. This can also lead to poor sleep hygiene because we're staying up late or having to wake up early in order to catch up on important tasks. Then, as we saw in the situation with Tom, financial vulnerability and insecurity. Generally, when we're being reactive, we like financial emergencies end up becoming devastating rather than manageable because we don't have emergency funds, or we become late or truant on rent or car payments or mortgage payments. And then this contributes to bad credit scores, which lead to an inability to get loans on cars or houses. And then the biggest thing that's going to affect us as renegades is then we lose the initiative, right? We become incapable of capitalizing on positive opportunities. Like maybe we get invited to something really cool that we want to go to, but we can't because we just don't have the time, or we can't jump on that investment opportunity because we just don't have the money to be able to do it. And in our specific example, Tom wasn't able to connect with the pretty girl from his class because all those reactive choices cascaded over, and he was not able to set the conditions for his success in that environment. And so all of these things end up undermining our ability to seize the initiative throughout the day. When we live reactively, we lose the ability to set the conditions for our own success and are stuck in a perpetual game of catch up. So we see that living reactively is bad enough as an individual, but what happens when we have other people that care about and depend on us? Or what happens when we're reactive, but we also hold a leadership position? See, this is when things get really ugly. There are few things that are more destructive to an organization than reactive leaders. See, long-term vision ends up getting abandoned to deal with short-term time challenges. Reactive leaders become consumed by immediate crises. The organization loses sight of its broader mission and goals, and strategic initiatives repeatedly end up getting postponed for daily bucket brigade firefighting, where you're having to put out all these little fires throughout the day because your organization has never had the time to train, man, and equip a fire department. And so this then ends up leading to a toxic corrosion of the organizational structure. You have chronic stress and burnout amongst the employees. The unstable work environment leads to heightened anxiety amongst team members. Turnover increases, and high performers and talented members leave the organization seeking better opportunities. Again, compounding the problems because now you have even fewer capable people to try and address those situations. This then leads to, again, a sense of learned helplessness where people stop attempting to address the larger systemic issues, seeing it as a lost cause. They end up developing fatalistic attitudes like saying, that's just how things are here. That's just the way it is. And then initiative and creativity wither as people slowly focus on just survival. And so this then leads to a decrease in morale and engagement. See, employees feel like they're constantly failing despite working hard every single day, and the workplace becomes characterized by exhaustion rather than achievement. And then purpose and meaning get lost in the daily scramble. So we as renegades, we generally are going to strive to be leaders. And in order to do that, we need to inoculate ourselves from these reactive habits and the problems we create. The more proactive we can be in our own personal lives, the better leaders we're going to be. And if you strive to be a good leader, you better be being proactive. And the definition of proactive is creating or controlling a situation by causing something to happen rather than responding to it after it has happened. See, being proactive is a mindset. It's an approach to life that involves taking the initiative and anticipating future events rather than just reacting to the circumstances after they occur. And that's where the phrase we get, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we're going to dig into this with a different short story, a little anecdote from the same morning from an individual that we're going to call Eric. So Eric wakes up early at 5:30, feeling well rested and ready to go for the day. He starts out with a quick warm up and stretch and works out to keep himself strong and healthy. He finds that working out in the morning helps him stay sharp and focused for the rest of the day and helps boost his confidence and his self-worth. He's going to need that today as it's a big day. After he works out, he showers and brushes his teeth and uses the toilet. He notices that the toilet paper is starting to get kind of low, so he takes an additional 30 seconds afterward to put 2 more rolls onto the back of the toilet for when he eventually does run out. Afterwards, he goes into his bedroom and he puts on the clothes that he had pre-picked out from the night before as part of his bedtime routine and grabs his backpack, which he pre-packed, and is ready to head downstairs. When he goes to make breakfast, he's got plenty of milk because he goes shopping every Sunday and buys slightly more than he actually needs throughout the week. And with his extra time, he's able to make himself a coffee at home, saving him money, and he heads out the door. When he leaves for school, he doesn't need to worry about gas because he gasses up every single weekend and when he goes food shopping, and generally still has a quarter to half a tank left by the end of the week when he refills. He then arrives to campus about 20 minutes early and is able to secure a close parking spot because he's arrived before most of the other students. Getting to class, he picks a seat in the second row, right next to where the cute girl generally sits. He's had a few good conversations with her already, and knowing that today is the last day of class, he decides he's going to ask her out. He spends a few minutes reviewing the notes, waiting for her to arrive, but he doesn't really need to, as he knows the material well. See, he spent an hour every day this week after dinner studying, and he knows just about everything at this point. The cute girl then arrives shortly later and sits next to him. Feeling confident and ready, he asks her out, to which she gives a big smile and emphatically replies yes. Eric is elated and then goes on to ace his test. So, as we can see, Eric has had a significantly better day than Tom has had. And it's all because in every decision that he was making, every choice that he faced throughout his morning, he had built proactivity into his life. So, now for kind of the practical application, how do we build proactivity into our daily lives? And how do we protect ourselves from the silent killer of being reactive? And we can do this by employing three main strategies. And that's going to be redundancy, planning, and appropriate time management. So, the first one, and one of the biggest ones, is going to be redundancy. And in my experience, redundancy and adaptability are the same word. I'm going to say that again. Redundancy is adaptability. See, when we build redundancy into our lives, when we have just a little bit more than we actually need to accomplish what we're doing, this offers a strategic reserve or a built-in buffer that allows us the flexibility and adaptability when faced with unexpected challenges. One of the ways that we see this is in like a transportation redundancy. See, as far as I know, most cars only need four tires to work. However, nearly every car comes with five. That's a built in redundancy because anyone who's ever had a flat tire and didn't have a spare knows how debilitating that situation can be. And so, by having that redundancy built in, that fifth tire that we're most likely never going to need, we can be adaptable to a changing situation. We also saw this in the story with Eric, where every single week he was filling up his gas tank on the same day, no matter how low his gas actually got. He wasn't waiting until the gas ran out. We can also employ this technique with redundancy in our financial situations by using financial redundancy. So, having an emergency fund. There are going to be times when we have unexpected expenses, when maybe we need to buy new tires, maybe there's a leak in the roof that we didn't know about, or we need to absorb some sort of unexpected cost without going destitute or being forced into a debt trap. And what we saw in Tom's situation is that he really didn't have any emergency funds, and the smallest expense might put him into destitution. And another way that we see this with redundancy is by having multiple income streams. See, if we only have one job, if we only have one income, that ends up being a built-in single point failure in our lives. And hundreds of thousands of people experienced this during COVID when everyone got laid off, entire industries got shut down, and suddenly people were forced into a really uncomfortable situation because they didn't have any sort of financial redundancy built into their lives. Then we take this redundancy and we look at having a time redundancy. So we saw this in the story with Eric by arriving to class 20 minutes early. If you can just plan to arrive everywhere you're going 15 minutes earlier than you need to be there, that's going to allow us to accommodate pretty much 90% of any of the challenges that we may face in our day. Like if we have bad traffic, difficulty finding parking, road closures, maybe we forgot something at home, that extra 15-minute buffer is going to allow us to address those issues without it becoming catastrophic. Another way that we can do this with our time redundancy is spacing out bigger projects over multiple smaller sessions. And we saw this with Eric by just spending 1 hour a day studying after dinner rather than Tom, who did an all-nighter. And so even though they both studied for around 7 hours, Eric is going to retain his information far better than Tom is. And then we can also do a time redundancy by scheduling in buffer blocks into our schedule. That's where we intentionally keep at least 30 to 60 minutes in between appointments and meetings as like sacred time, that we don't put meetings back to back. And this way it allows us the opportunity to maybe prepare for the next meeting. If we have to go to the bathroom, if the former meeting ran long, it allows us this built-in protected personal time that we can adapt for changing situations. And then when it goes to scheduling, the other thing we should do is build in protected personal time and planning time. So that's time for working out. That's time for meditation. That's time for creative expression and hobbies. And that's going to help us refresh and rejuvenate so that we can always be putting our best foot forward rather than constantly being burnt out. And so, by building in redundancy into every aspect of our life, redundancy with gas, redundancy with food, redundancy with time and finances, it allows us to be dynamic, giving us the freedom of maneuver to set the conditions for us to address problems and deviations before they can bubble up into a crisis. Now, our second major strategy is going to be using planning. And some of the techniques that we can do that is building in a specific time just for planning within our weekly schedule. So that's maybe every Friday afternoon. That's going to be dedicated to planning for the following week. This allows us to look ahead and make decisions from a place of calm and clarity rather than under pressure. Then we can also do this by creating weekly proactive routines built into our schedule. So, some of the ones that I've found that have been super helpful for me is building meal prep into my weekly schedule, having a specific day, either Saturday or Sunday, where I plan out and I cook all the food I'm going to need for the week, either my dinners or I pre-pack my lunches. So that way, when I go to work, I'm not forced to eat fast food because I already have all 5 lunches stacked up and ready to go, and I'm not breaking my diet and I'm sticking to the things that I want to do. Then we can also use habit stacking. Habit stacking is an idea from the book Atomic Habits that we'll be reviewing later. But the idea is that we're linking new, unpracticed habits on top of existing ones that are already established within our schedule that creates an automatic trigger for the proactive behavior that we're trying to learn. So for me, it's like grocery shopping. I was really good at always grocery shopping once a week on the same day, but I was bad about just running my tank till it was nearly empty before getting gas. And habit stacking is, well, I'm good. I've established the grocery shopping. All I got to do is stack getting gas right on top of that. So now every time that I go grocery shopping, I'm like, oh yeah, I just got to get gas now. And I get gas once a week as well. And so I'm never running out of gas. I've also done this with flossing in the shower. I'm really good at showering in the mornings. I'm really bad at flossing. So what did I do? I just put floss in the shower. And this way, every morning when I'm taking that long, hot shower, I'm just sitting there flossing as well. And now I floss nearly every day. So another thing that we can do with our planning is doing to-do lists for multiple time horizons. What that looks like is it's making short-term to-do lists. That's like our 48-hour to-do list. Our medium-term to-do list, that's like things that we should be doing over the next couple of months. And then our long-term to-do list, that's objectives that we want to complete over the next few years. And what I do is I start with that long-term to-do list. What do I want my life to look like? What do I want to have accomplished? Where do I want to be in 3 years? And then you write those down. You put those on your long-term to-do list. And then you break them down into smaller, more achievable goals that then get put on your medium-term to-do list that helps you stay on track with what you're doing. So let's say that like you want to buy a new car, a new house, start a new career. All of those things, those are going to go on your long-term to-do list. Or like starting, say you want to go to grad school. And then on your medium-term to-do list, you break that down where the first month you're going to research grad schools. Month 2, you're going to visit a couple of grad schools. Month 3, you're going to apply to schools and scholarships. And then your short-term to-do list, everyone has those. That's things like food shopping, doing laundry, catching up with friends. Everyone sees that. But by having short, medium, and long-term to-do lists, and you can actually see mine in the background there, it allows you to have that kind of accountability mechanism built into your life of, hey, this is where I want to be. This is where I am. These are the stages of how I'm going to get there. And it becomes a visual representation of that long-range strategic planning, which is crucial to being proactive. For our last main strategy, that's going to be using appropriate time management. And the tool that we're going to use for that, which I really like, is this quadrant, which is called the urgent versus important matrix. And so what that does is it's 4 cells, and you're breaking up every single thing that you do throughout the day as to whether it is urgent or non-urgent, and important or non-important. And then each of those tasks, depending upon what they're rated, is how much time you should spend doing those tasks. So your not important, not urgent tasks like scrolling social media, doomsday scrolling on Instagram, those are going to be the areas where you really don't want to be spending any time. Whereas your important and urgent tasks, those are like the critical ones that you have to jump on and do something about right now. And then the best ones, the most important ones, are your not urgent but important ones. Those are going to be things like long-range strategic planning, working out, saving for a house, investing in a career, going to grad school. Those are the most important ones that you should be working on. But that was a real quick synopsis of that tool. However, I think it is so important that actually next week I'm going to be doing a deep dive into that tool, what each one of those quadrants looks like, and how you can categorize all the things you're doing in your life to really retain that focus. So that's a little sneak peek of what's to come for next week. But in conclusion, what do we think? What do bad leaders, credit cards, and flat tires all have in common? You got it. You guys know it. It's they all force us into being reactive. See, in all, being reactive is the enemy. Being reactive is this silent killer that sneaks its way into our life and robs us from the ability to succeed and fully seize on the initiative. And so we can counter this silent killer through habitual dedication and practice in being proactive in our daily habits and using tools like redundancy, planning, and appropriate time management. And now that you've been armed with the tools to fight this, we want to invite you to join our movement. Welcome, Renegade. So, what did you guys think? Was that good? Was it not? What worked for you? What didn't? Do you have better examples than what we came up with? How have you seen reactivity in your own life or in your own workplace? And how has being proactive maybe put you in a position where you could capitalize on a really great opportunity that you otherwise may have missed? Seriously though, guys, drop your thoughts, your comments, your stories into the comments below. We read all of them. And then with each of these episodes, we're going to do like a remix episode where we're going to revisit the topic later on, going through all the comments and discussing the new ideas and perspectives that you all contribute. So if you guys want to be a part of the Renegade Institute history, this is one of the best ways to do it, and drop your thoughts and comments below. If you've made it this far in the episode and you think we've earned it, please hit that like or that subscribe button. That really helps us know what's resonating with you guys, what kind of content you like, so that we can really be putting out some of the best stuff. Other than that, we got our closing quote of the day. This one's going to be coming from Thomas Jefferson. So he was being accused of not believing in luck, to which he responded back, "I fully believe in luck. I just find the harder that I work, the more luck that I seem to have." Anyhow, that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and we'll see you guys here next week. Have a great one. Cheers. Every time, treat everyone like it's real. Because sometimes you do really well, and then you don't set the background, and it screws up the whole video. But it's fine. It's fine. We got it. We're going to do it again. It's going to be perfect. All right.